Hey guys, David here and welcome to another rather rare figure review. And I had some leftover credit on BBTS, and Arkham Origins takes place on Christmas Eve, so what better way to celebrate Christmas than with the Dark Knight himself. Here is my review of Batman Arkham Origins Batman from Series 1. This is part of the first series that comes with the Joker, Black Mask, and Bane, I believe. And this is the default Batman that is in the Arkham Origins video game. And he is part of the DC Collectibles line, not to be confused with the DC Ultimate line. There's two different Batman Arkham Origins figures out there. This is the one from the DC Collectibles line, not DC Unlimited. Now before I get to the figure, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the packaging really quick. It's a little unconventional for as far as packaging for action figures go. I'm more accustomed to the traditional style of packaging, mainly plastic bubble packaging. This, the shape of it is rather weird. It looks like an upside down pendulum. When I first opened up the box, it looked like a pendulum, upside down, swinging about. I know that they're trying to go with something that matches the bat symbol over here at the top, but it looks kind of weird. It does look a little more convenient for retailers to stock them up on the racks. It's rather thin here, so it's easy to fit onto the rack, especially with the little hook over here at the top, the plastic hook. But the packaging, it looks alright. Fits the concept design of all forms of merchandising with Batman Arkham Origins. You got the snow in the background. You got the icy Batman logo. You can see it right there. Yeah, all the color and the stuff, and yeah, Arkham Origins Batman Action Figures Series 1, DC Collectibles, little seal right there to make sure that it is a DC collectible figure. I really like that it comes with this little plastic bump. That way it's not tipping over. It can actually stand on its own within the packaging. Let's rotate it over here in the back, collect them all. There you have Batman, Joker, Black Mask, and Bane. Of course, from the Arkham Origins game, so they're going to differ in appearance from the other Arkham games, because Arkham Origins is said to be a prequel before the events of those two other games. Sculpted by Gentle Giant Studios, will then determine the quality of that sculpt. Yeah, Arkham Origins, based on the hit video game Batman Arkham Origins, featuring an expanded Gotham City. Batman Arkham Origins introduces an original prequel storyline set several years before Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City. Taking place before the rise of Gotham City's most dangerous criminals, players will meet many important characters for the first time and form key relationships. I love how they refer to the hero-villain adversary between Batman and the Joker as a relationship. That was kind of funny. Anyways, that about does it for the packaging. Let's go ahead and crack it open and take a look at the actual figure. So here we have the Dark Knight himself, Batman, out of the packaging, and right off the bat, he looks extraordinary. Now, like I said, this is the DC collectible version, or DC Direct as they were formerly called. This is not the DC Unlimited version. From what I heard, based on reviews and whatnot, DC Unlimited has a few problems that kept me from wanting to purchase the figure. Even though I was given a really good first impression from the images and whatnot, but I decided to go with the DC collectible version because it looked much superior. And sure enough, out of the packaging, he just looks great. The sculpt on this guy is amazing, and the paint decal, the shade of gray that they decided to go with his costume here is just great, and all the padding. This is obviously the early years of Batman, so his costume is supposed to have an awful lot of pads because it reflects how unsure he was to take on Gotham when he first started. At least that's my interpretation of that. And DC Collectibles did an amazing job translating that from the video game on over to a figure, because the sculpt is outstanding. Let me give you here a 360 shot. Now, obviously you can tell what kind of material the cape is made out of by just simply moving it. It's made out of that, I don't want to say flimsy, but flexible rubber that could get torn, but only with great force. It's not necessarily delicate. It is durable, but it's going to take a while for it to actually rip. But it does rip if you are not careful with it. But it is made out of that flexible rubber that I've seen done on other figures, especially Batman figures with the cape. But let me continue this 360 tour of Batman. Like I said, the sculpt is outstanding. I heard that one of the issues of the DC Unlimited version is that the legs are quite disproportionate to the rest of his body, especially the upper body. Fortunately, from my point of view, it doesn't look like that's a bit of a problem. His legs look proportionate. Now, granted they look rather thick, but I'm guessing that's more because of how the costume is designed within the game, much more than the actual sculpt of the figure. Because proportion-wise, he looks great. He really does. I don't see any sort of problem. And there are the legs there with the knee pads and the shin guards. He just looks great. And like I said, the paint decals are great as well. I really like how they decided to go with this shade of gray. Like, for example, this one has a much more matte finish to it, if you can tell from the lighting bouncing off of the texture there. It has a much more matte finish as opposed to the glossy look that the DC Unlimited version has. My only little nitpick with the paint decals is that I kind of wish that they went a little more than what they gave us, which is one of the things that the Unlimited version has over this one, is that there's certain tiny little things that were painted in the DC Unlimited one over this one, such as the little washers in between each piece within the costume. You can kind of make them out there. Those were some really good opportunities to go ahead and paint those in and give it a much more vivid paint decal, but I still enjoy what they gave us. I really like the paint applications. Now, there's only one that I'm not a huge fan of, and that is his facial hair, because based on the game, I haven't played the game yet, but I can tell from the trailers and the stills that because this is the early years of Batman, he's a little too naive, and I'm guessing that people won't recognize him if he happens to have just a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. And unfortunately, he carries that along with him when his entire freaking mouth is exposed. But they went ahead and they translated that onto the figure, and it didn't come out very well. I don't know if you can see it in the lighting. I don't know, maybe from further away you can kind of see it. But they went ahead and they painted facial hair on, and it looks more like dirt rather than actual hair. Just, you know, the patterns are a little off, and it just doesn't look like actual hair. It looks more like my figure's dirty. Like if somebody who wasn't aware that Batman had facial hair in the game and they were to come over to my house and look at my figure, they'll be like, dude, there's something on your Batman's mouth. Because that's what it looks like. So that's the only paint decal that I'm not a fan of. But everything else just looks great, especially combining the paint applications along with the sculpt. He looks amazing. Scale-wise, he's about maybe 7 inches. I got my ruler here. It's only a 6-inch ruler though, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of estimation, but see if you can see it right there. That's 6 inches at the shoulder, so I'm guessing he is about 7.5 inches actually. 7 3/4 if you count the ears. So yeah, he is pretty tall, and taller than a usual Batman figure, whether it be the 6 inches or the 5.5 inches. And having him be taller than the usual Batman figure allows for greater detail. And for comparison, here we have, let me move him to the side, right there. Here we have Movie Master's Batman from the Dark Knight series. I believe this guy was made by Mattel. And as you can clearly tell, this guy looks like me in a Batman costume compared to this guy. This guy looks like The Rock in the Batman suit, as opposed to this guy who looks like a wimpy guy like me. I mean, wow. I can't believe this. I've spent so much time with this guy that when I went and looked for this guy to compare him in terms of scale, I was like, wow, wow. Look at that. I mean, look at that. Look how skinny he is. It's just, I don't want to say it's ridiculous, but man, wow. I remember this figure being the shiznit when I got it, and now that I got this guy, I still appreciate him, but there. Anyways, for size comparison, this guy is, I think, 6 inches. I believe he's 6 inches. Yep, 6 inches. Not counting the ears. So yeah, this guy is the 6-inch model from the Movie Masters line from Mattel. And here we have the 7.5 or 7 3/4 version from DC Collectibles. So there you go. Now let's talk about the articulation. But before I get to that, I want to go ahead and put out a disclaimer. This is actually not my first DC collectible Batman Arkham Origins Batman figure. This is actually my second one. The first one broke and I had to send for a replacement because there was a problem with the articulation. The the knee has two joints within it. The top joints on that first figure were incredibly stiff, and when I tried to move them, boom, they broke, and this knee pad here on the right knee broke off. And I could have tried to have fixed that, and I could have tried to loosen up the joints by applying the hot air of a blow dryer or sinking it in some really warm water and then putting it in the freezer. I heard some people suggesting that, putting it in the freezer. But you know what? I just decided to go ahead and send for a replacement and hope that that one had better articulation. And I'm happy to report that this second version of the figure that I received does have better articulation. The knees do bend. They were a little stiff at first, but not stiff enough to not try, and fortunately able to loosen them up without having them be too loose and risk breaking the figure as well. Both knees bend at 2 points. You got 1 point down there. Let me get a little closer here. They bend right there, and they're ratcheted too, so they're a little bit, they're going to be stiff and going to be able to provide a decent amount of poses. But they're ratcheted, and they have two joints, one down there and one up there. And it bends there about 3 times, and then it bends again at the top about twice, or maybe just once, And then actually it popped a fourth time. Oh, there you go. There's the second time. So there you go. The knee can bend backwards that far, and the previous figure could not do that. So I'm fortunate to have received a decent replacement. So thank you, Big Bad Toy Store. But as you can see, that's the articulation for the knee. It also comes with a knee swivel at the very top, like so. And the same thing goes for the other knee, although the other knee is actually a little bit stiffer. But it still manages to bend, like so. So that's pretty cool. And it also has that knee swivel as well. So let me just pop that in there. But be careful, because at any moment those knee pads could also come off, or the knee joints could also break. So just be tender with Batman. He's a sensitive guy. He also has an ankle swivel that allows the ankle to rotate. Actually, it's more of a ball joint. Yeah, it's not a swivel, it's a ball joint. And within the ball joint, there's also a hinge-like joint that allows the ankle to move up and down. Now, these joints are a little loose, a little more loose than I would want them to be, but they're not intolerable. You know, they're not the worst loose joints that I've ever seen in my life. And speaking of his feet, they're sculpted a little weird, like the soles aren't exactly even. And combining that, which I think is probably the only problem that I have with the sculpt of this figure, with how loose the joints, the ankle joints in particular, are, it makes standing him a little bit of a challenge. Then at the top here, you got a T-joint that connects both the upper legs, and that allows them to move forwards that far, and then move backwards that far, like so. And they can also move inwards and outwards that far. So in some ways, at a realistic level, they have a decent amount of mobility. But like I said, realistically, because I like that they don't go all the way back here and all the way in front and all the way like splits. I like that. Plus, his armor wouldn't allow for that. So I like that they, quote unquote, accidentally made that realistic in some way. My only concern would be that whenever you move those legs, there's going to be a problem with the seams, as it were, the quote-unquote seams. You can kind of see the gaps in between his crotch and his leg. You can see the empty space there when you move the leg back, so that can be a bit of a problem presentation-wise, but what you going to do? That's how the figure moves. He's got a waist joint that I'm assuming moves 360 degrees, but it could be a little hindered by the rubber utility belt, but it's not a problem. You can move very freely. Just don't want to try it because I don't want it to become too loose. You get what I'm saying? He also comes with an ab crunch, which I believe is absent in the DC Unlimited version. So there you go. Got an ab crunch going on right there. And then you got the arm joints. You can move the arm inwards and outwards, backwards and forwards, but of course, when it comes to moving it backwards, it's hindered by the cape. But it moves forwards freely as well as up, like so. And he also comes with an elbow joint, just a basic elbow joint that allows the elbow to bend 90 degrees like so, and allows the lower arm to rotate, like that. Full 360 degrees. And he has a wrist joint that allows the wrist to also rotate 360 degrees, like that. It's a little tough because you got this piece in the way here. And it also nudges inwards and outwards just a little bit. just that far. But still, pretty cool and pretty decent articulation. And he also has a ball joint here in the neck to allow the head to rotate a full 360 degrees, but it is a little tight. As you can hear, it's starting to get a little squeaky there. So I'm a little nervous to go ahead and rotate it the full 360. Wouldn't do it realistically anyway, so let's just go ahead and leave it at that. But it does allow for a full range of motion, realistically, like I said. Fully to the right and fully to the left. And it moves up and down just a little bit, which is one of the things that I kind of wish that they would have done with his neck articulation. Would be able to move the head up and down a little more freely, especially if he were to look up like at a villain or something. Granted, that could be what the ab crunch is for. So articulation-wise, he's great. He doesn't have the most articulation that a figure could have, but if it were to have any more articulation, it would kind of start to look a little skinny, like one of the DC Direct Batman Arkham City figures. I think it was Series 4, where he had all this articulation, but it kind of sacrificed some of the bulkiness that we've come Batman to have. So when he had all this articulation, he started to look a little skinnier, and I wasn't a fan of that. But I really dig how this Batman looks. He's got the sculpting right, he's got the proportions right, he's got great articulation, at least this version does this second time around. The only other problems that I could have with the figure is almost not so much the figure itself, but rather how DC Direct decides to package him. And some of the packaging that he came with, like you saw at the beginning of the review, causes the figure to come with some slight little problems when it comes to whether it be the paint applications or some warping going on. Like for example, the blades on the gauntlets that we've come Batman to know for, they come a little warped, and I'm not a fan of that. Let me get a little closer there. Yeah, as you can see, the third one up is a little bent upwards and forwards, and I'm a little nervous to go ahead and press it back because I feel like it's just gonna break off. And the same thing on the other one. Yeah, just a little bit right there. Let's see if you can see it. Right there, it's bending downwards. It's kind of curling in a way. Not a fan of that, DC Direct, or DC Unlockable, whatever your freaking name is now. Yeah, I kind of wish that they would be a little more careful with that. And also on the cape. Let me wipe off my sweat there, that's gross. But yeah, in the packaging, it came packaged in a way where the cape is through this little hole, and it's kind of separated from the figure through a tray. Like the tray is right here in the middle, and the cape is on one side, and the figure is on the inward portion of the tray. So it's wrapped around this little hole here at this point, and you can kind of make out where that hole was, because it kind of leaves a little outline on the cape right there. You can kind of see it right there. And a little bit of the paint on the cape is kind of coming off a little bit where that hole was. So as I took it out, it kind of scraped off the paint a little bit right there. Kind of do the same. You can kind of see the same thing over here. I don't know if it's coming across well on the camera, but yeah, that's a bit of a problem. Not a huge fan of that. It also has a little dent right there. I don't know what Batman was doing. I don't know if he got mind probed or something, or he entered the Matrix. But he's got a little dent there on his head. So, yeah, I kind of wish that they would take care of their figures a little bit more when it comes to packaging them, knowing that they designed a great product here, a great figure, but they got to take care of it a little bit more, because I'm not a fan of how we didn't ask for battle damage. If you could save your battle damage for an actual battle damage figure rather than the first version in the line in the first series. So yeah, that's a bit of a nitpick of mine, but overall this is not only one of my favorite Batman figures, but one of my favorite figures period from my entire collection that is not a Transformer. I just love displaying this guy in various poses. I like looking at him because his sculpt and his paint decals and his proportions are all great. I just wish that, like I said, there were some missed opportunities with the paint decals, and I kind of wish that DC Direct would handle their figures just a little better, because you can kind of see where they don't really care that much, because they managed to damage the figure slightly. And I'm hoping that's not the case with other figures, and I'm hoping it's just me. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just this second version that sure got improved upon when it came to the articulation, because the first one had those problems, but hopefully it's just me, and if you guys have one of these, then please let me know if it also came with some of those paint decals scratched off, like in the cape and that little dent on the head and whatnot. But other than that, the figure has great articulation. Granted, there could have been more, but then it would have sacrificed some of the sculpting and some of the paint decals and just the overall look, and it wouldn't look as badass as he does now. And let me go ahead and try to put him in a... I had him in a good pose earlier, so let me see if I can get that pose back, because he looked awesome. There you go. Yeah, ready to kick some ass on Christmas Eve. Who took my presents? That Bale Boys needs to die. Anyways, I love this figure. Can't get enough of it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9.5 out of 10, which is an A. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos. And as always, take care, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. And Merry Christmas to all from the Batman. Oh, goodness.